Hi everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nikki Moffat, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors here at the ICA. For those of you who do know me, I hope that I'll get to see you sometime soon. It's been way too long and I've missed you. I think it's fair to say that David was a founding father of the ICA. He was with us from the very beginning. David served 25 years on the board, was the head of the curatorial committee for 10, curated some exhibitions on his own, and was sort of our in-house photographer. He was in all ways an avid supporter of and integral to the ICA, and he was loved and admired by everyone. And he still is. So I wasn't surprised when I suggested that we dedicate a small space at the ICA to David by the level of enthusiasm with which this idea was greeted by our board, our members, and our staff. We set up the David Pace Legacy Fund to fund the renovation of the space, and it was an immediate success, thanks to all of you who so generously donated to the fund. The gallery's 2 rooms are comprised of what was once our printmaking center, and the smaller room was a conference room. The light in the gallery is ideal for showing photographs and drawings and the like, work that requires an indirect light rather than the harsher, more direct light that might harm the art. Enjoy your video tour, which will be led by Diane Jonte-Pace, David's wife and partner in all things. So keep us in mind, see what's in store, and please return often to enjoy the art and the gallery, which would also be another wonderful way to honor the memory and the legacy of David Pace, whom we all miss more than I can say.
I would like to thank the ICA board, and all of the donors that contributed to make the David Pace Gallery in this space. It's a beautiful space, and David would have been so honored by it. I also want to thank the ICA for making this exhibition of David's work the first exhibition for the space. It's beautifully curated, and it doesn't show all of the projects that he worked on, but it shows a really good sample of his life and his work very well. As you enter the space, the first thing you see is a set of animated music videos. These are projects that date to the 1990s. The last one was completed in 2003. There are 3 videos based on the work of postmodern philosophers. Nothing is Fundamental is based on the work of Michel Foucault.
The asylum is a religious domain, a religious domain without religion.
Woman is a Symptom, based on the work of Jacques Lacan.
Beneath the veil, imaginary lack. One becomes 2, there is no going back.
The Spirit of Gravity is based on Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra.
Time is a circus. Man is a rope.
The Nietzsche video, Spirit of Gravity, won a number of awards. I have to admit it's my favorite of these. David and his collaborator, Victor Belomo, who was a friend for many, many years. Victor is a musician and filmmaker himself. They read the work of the philosophers. They took the words and the ideas and they put them to music. They played the music, they sang the songs, they made the images, cut them out, and collaged them and turned them into animated videos, and they're quite remarkable. There are additionally 3 short videos about 1 to 2 minutes long. One's called What Does Science Tell Us About Me?, which is a parody of a TV ad and a critique of anti-science ideologies.
Is it just a cosmic joke? Does it play tricks on our eyes? Do fish need science?
Another one is called Don't Touch That Dial, and it is about how the media captures our identity and controls our culture. What's really important about these is that there's a lot of movement. There's flying, falling, floating, bubbles rising, bubbles falling, crashing down. And I want to highlight that theme of movement because you see the theme of movement in a number of the other projects in this exhibition. The Velocity project was from the last years of David's life. These photos are from 2018 when we were in Japan. We took the bullet train from Tokyo to Kyoto. These photos have not been exhibited elsewhere. I think this is the first exhibition of these other than the Pace Gallery in our home. David pressed the lens of the camera to the window of the train and took a photo every few seconds. And I want to read to you what he wrote about this project. On the train, the buildings and landscapes become a blur. I made the photos, trusting that the camera would reveal scenes that my eye did not have time to process. Later, I selected the images that conveyed the feeling I had on the train, a sense of extreme motion experienced from a place of quiet stillness. Photography allows me to experience what I cannot see and create stories from things I dimly perceive. This project was between his 2 cancers, after the lymphoma and before the leukemia. I think that this theme of velocity and the sense of movement in the images really shows his awareness of mortality. It's a real reflection on the brevity of life. That theme of motion brings us to the next project. The wire photo project is one that David worked on between 2017 and 2019. It was a collaboration with Stephen Wirtz, a longtime friend of David's, who ran the Wirtz Gallery in San Francisco for many years. It was shown at the Griffin Museum near Boston and at the Schilt Gallery in Amsterdam, and it was published as a book in 2019 called Images in Transition, Wire Photo 1938 to 1945. The photos are transformations of 80-year-old photographs that were originally sent by radio and wire during World War II for publication in US newspapers. The transmission process that was used at the time leaves scratches and marks in the images that look like speed lines. They're evidence of the movement of the transition. Steve Wirtz had collected these photos over many years, so David and Steve were working with a cultural archive, an archive of historical memory. David and Steve transformed the originals. They recropped, reframed, highlighted the evidence of the transmission process, and they emphasized the sense of movement. They were also interested in the way that the images were used to report on the war in newspapers and in how they were manipulated. This one called Splash, for example, the photographer was shooting the image of an airplane falling and missed the splash. The splash itself was painted in so that it could tell the story in the publication. The next project is called Hawkeye. These are photos that David took with the camera that he received for his 8th birthday in 1959. 60 or so of the images have been published in a book called Hawkeye with Schilt Publishing. We just have 2 images from the Hawkeye project here, but the book as a whole has a real documentation of home, school, church, and work in the late 50s and early 60s in the pear and walnut orchards of pre-Silicon Valley Sunnyvale. Here's what David wrote. I had been looking at photos from cultural archives, recovering and restoring bits of the past. I decided it was finally time to revisit my own personal archive, the images I took more than 60 years ago. I began scanning the negatives, cleaning them, making archival digital prints. I was flooded with memories. It's like having a visual diary from a time I barely remember. I really like the emphasis on memory and the visual diary. It's a very evocative project. It captures a real sense of post-war optimism, but also a strong sense of sorrow over the loss of the rural agricultural context in Sunnyvale. So it's not the theme of movement that I want to emphasize here, but rather the exploration of the personal archive that's also a cultural archive. Moving here to the Route 66 project. This dates to the late 80s and early 90s. It was previously shown at San Jose State University. Like the Hawkeye project, this captures a sense of America in transition. And also like Hawkeye, it emphasizes the loss of this vibrant part of American culture. David used a postcard format to emphasize the journey, the road trip, and on subsequent trips he would send me postcards that he had printed of Route 66 from Route 66. His title for this project was The Archaeology of the American Roadside. He was interested in the theme of archaeology in terms of documenting the disappearing traces of this famous American road. He liked the abandoned shops, the faded billboards, the empty drive-ins. It captures the beauty and the nobility of these aging structures. I think there's a very sad and almost mournful quality. The emphasis on archaeology is part of the segue to the next project. There's a pyramid from Tikal, Guatemala, that David photographed in the mid-90s, and there is an image from the brick quarry in Burkina Faso that was part of a series David did between 2007 and 2016. The quarry series was shown in Venice as part of the Venice Biennale in 2019. David spent at least a month every year for 10 years in West Africa, documenting daily life in a rural village near this quarry. I'd like to read what David wrote about the quarry series. As you approach the quarry, the dazzling color is the first thing you notice. In the golden light of the afternoon sun, the multiple facets of the quarry emit a reddish glow that suffuses the entire area. The scale of the place is immense. The lines and patterns etched into the towering walls are all the product of human hands. Decades of labor have produced the tectonic designs. The deep pit with its corners, angles, and towers is the result of carving and cutting bricks from solid stone, creating what might be seen as the opposite of architecture. I like to think of this as archaeology and architecture, or archaeology and structure. And I think that the curator made a good decision to put these on the walls to give us this moment to breathe and to think about the themes of memory and movement that we've seen in the other work before we step into the next space. The next space is the Collections or Recollections project. This dates to the 90s and early 2000s. The Collections or Recollections project highlights the work of collectors who gathered unusual collections of objects, and it also highlights David's own love of collecting, and we have some examples of David's toaster collection in this space as well. The name Recollections or Recollections highlights the theme of memory that we've seen in so many of these other photo projects. David put together a series of grids with specific collections, each one gathered by a single creator. He saw the grids as a kind of abstract portrait of the person who collected them, the plumb bob collector, for example. That tells us something about the man in Fresno who gathered these gorgeous plumb bobs. David was influenced by the work of the Beckers in Germany. They were photographing grids of industrial structures and water towers. Here, David is focusing on the small objects of daily life, so that we see the emphasis on design, we see the evidence of human use, and the scale is important. In each case, the images are printed larger than life. David talked about this project as the affirmation of the ordinary. It's really about the appreciation of objects of everyday life and seeing the beauty in them, seeing the artistic qualities in them. There's a book by Kandinsky called Concerning the Spiritual in Art, and this reminds me of this project. It's really about seeing the spiritual in the everyday or seeing the artistic in the everyday. And I think that David himself was always transforming everyday objects in an artistic way. What's quite dominant in this space is not only David's grids, which are the collections of others, but also this photograph of David's cabinet that houses a collection of things from over many years. Marco Zacchine, who's a local photographer, took the photo and it's enlarged significantly so it becomes almost a trompe-l'oeil experience, much larger than life. In the background of the videos that we discussed earlier are a number of the items that are in this cabinet. I think this is kind of a cabinet of wonders of David's work and David's life and David's objects. I think it's a lovely reflection on David the artist and David the person. And I'm very grateful to the ICA for creating this space and this show.